in the county, and the table kind of illustrates that as far as the agricultural productive, and then when you switch over to rural transitional, rural residential, and so forth, is there be restrictions as far as cultivation and some of those other alternative zonings that you have a density of folks, but yet there's space, and I'm happy you stated that the 400 feet was kind of a space holder, but those type of setbacks, I think take a lot of information from the public. Probably the committee is to meet some more and evaluate it, and probably the planning commission is a weigh in on it as well. But is there be restrictions on the type of zoning that you'll have cultivation on, because this carries a lot of area.
Yeah, so that does. So actually, if you look at your ordinance, and I'll try to jump back here. If you look at your ordinance, you'll actually have so everything that you have in that map is not included in the recommendation. It's the next one over here. It's what you see here under 2. So you could check those boxes off if you want, Supervisor, so you could take a look at it. I know the map is pretty small, so my apologies for that. But really, these are the ones that will be included in that.
Great.
And then within the industrial zones, remember, those are zones that actually allow parcels to be smaller than 5 acres, right? So that's going to complicate things a little bit. I don't want to say complicate, but it limits sort of what you're able to do. And what we've kind of envisioned, we meaning the stakeholders and the ad hoc committee members, is obviously fully enclosed operations only in industrial zoning. Right. And allowing the greenhouse in the other zones.
Right. And again, I just want to say that I'm really impressed to see where we're at. I'm impressed with the draft. And the one last question I have, which is important in my district, is dark skies and compliance with other ordinances. I certainly expect these type of operations to be respectful of that as well. But anyhow, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Hey, Victor, we got a couple more questions. Supervisor Munzer?
8 o'clock at night, I'd like to go off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having worked on the oil ordinance with Supervisor Patello a few years back, I know the amount of work that goes in to craft a new county ordinance of this magnitude. I, too, want to thank you, Victor, and all the committee members that have worked so diligently on this. So since we're on this page of zoning, and maybe I missed it, but this is a cannabis permit for medical marijuana grow. Are we eliminating people growing it in their own homes?
So this isn't addressing the personal use component of it.
That's what.
But some of you are smiling because I'll be meeting with some of you in the near future to talk about that. That'll be a separate discussion.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We want to make sure, and just to clarify that, Mr. Chair, through the chair, Supervisor Munzer, is, this is an ordinance that could be adopted, could go to the voters next year for the tax, and then potentially could fail. And if it does, we want to make sure that the personal use ordinance doesn't, and that one stays pretty solid.
Gotcha.
So,
okay, thank you.
Hey, Victor, actually, I was going to ask that same question, and Supervisor Moses beat me to it. So the way I read this is that there's a list of zoning, and it doesn't include, I think number 2, it doesn't include residential, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So you can't do it in the residential, correct?
No, and we've actually excluded, commercial thoroughfare, neighborhood commercial, planned unit development. All those have been
so when
stricken.
When you come back to address the 6 plants per legal residence, that will be an exemption to
that's
number 2.
Different, yeah. So you can't ban that, right? You can't through Prop 64. You can't ban allowing growth in residential areas. You have to allow 6 plants in residential areas.
Okay. And my final thoughts before I go to the public, I too want to thank the committee, the staff, yourself, Victor, and everyone else who had an input. Not barking on Supervisor Botello. Him and I, when we were on the committee, we reached no consensus on it, and so I do appreciate that the committee's actually bringing a consensus and asking us for input. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we're going to open up to the public. Who's the first person on the list?
Tim Foley. Can I pass it this time?
Sure. No problem. Put it to the end.
Stephanie Smith.
Thank you, everyone. So just a few things. I have read through the ordinance. As you can see, I've taken great notes and spent a lot of time with it. And there's a lot of work that's been done, and really appreciate that. There are a few issues I want to bring up for you to consider. One is with the smell and light plans. I think it would be better. It says an odor and light pollution control plan need to be submitted. It would be really great if you can include some actual regulations around that. I think the Monterey County has some very clear, air scrubbing specifications that they've put in. The other thing that's really, really important is the waiver that the coordinator, cannabis coordinator, has. I mean, if we're not going to have a law that's enforceable, that there's a provision to give them the ability to waive anything in the subdivision, all of the any of the rules, to just waive that. And it says because it may create a hardship for the cannabis business. What about the hardship for the residents? I mean, this ordinance is being drafted for the safety of the residents in the area, and because the cannabis businesses create a hardship on the residents, I mean, the rules in the ordinance should be protecting the residents, and there should not be a waiver or an option to waive any of these rules that you're putting in place, because then that creates a big gray area of the law, and I think we're trying to get away from that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was that there's some specifications in here around the use of water from any water source that's not on the parcel. I think it would be good to get a little bit more specific, because there are two different mentions of this, and one of them says unless permitted. And so I think it just needs to be more specific and match the other areas of the ordinance that that ask for a notarized signature from the business or from the neighbor. I would say present neighbor, because perhaps their property sells and the new owner doesn't agree to the water source being used. So that, and then finally. There was an item in the back, because you said again and again this isn't about dispensing and or about consumer, and I think there needs to be a little bit more cleanup here around whether this is a B2B kind of business-to-business type of an ordinance, or whether you're actually looking at B to B to C or B to C, because on this last, page 24, it goes over including information for qualified patients. This shouldn't even apply. It looks like maybe it was dropped in from an old ordinance. So I just want to encourage that type of cleanup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Peter Brazil.
When the members of the audience speak of an item on the draft, we the board appreciate if you can tell us which page so we can follow on your discussion.
Good evening. Thank you, members of the board, staff. My name is Peter Brazil. I'm an attorney at L&G LLP on behalf of multiple clients in the county. First, as you all did, I'd like to thank the board, the ad hoc committee, staff for their work on this. Victor Gomez as well with Pinnacle Strategies, because it is a lot of hard work. It takes a long time to get this. I went through this whole process already in Monterey County, so I'm familiar with how long this takes. First, I'm just going to hit a couple of items here. The draft ordinance is a great start. It has some things that need to be worked on, as you've already heard from some speakers. I want to speak to 3 items here. The cultivation setbacks that you guys have in here, there are 2 references in here setting a 400-foot setback from the facility to the boundary line of the premises. I think this is a little restrictive. When you come to smaller parcels, it becomes problematic. When you have these big ag parcels that you guys are contemplating, maybe not so much. But again, it restricts the operator and the landowner from using the parcel in the most productive or efficient or safe manner by allowing them to elect where to place these grows. I think a 100-foot setback and, again, maybe a structure-to-structure setback might be a more efficient and allowable kind of way to go about this. Next thing I'd like to hit is the ordinance itself, as much as an attorney might like it, doesn't speak to the number of permits that somebody can take out regarding cultivation. This was a bit mysterious at the state level. It was very clearly clarified by the regs or the draft regs that were recently released. You guys were talking about whether or not to use a 10A license and whatnot because of the 4-acre canopy. You can eliminate that issue entirely, which, at least from right now, you guys have already said you're not going to allow manufacturing or dispensing. So since this is a strictly cultivation issue, you really shouldn't be talking about the 10A anyway. By making it clear that you can apply for multiple permits of varying sizes depending on how your property is situated and the amount of grow you want would be a much more efficient way to go about it. The county's already made the decision to move forward on cannabis cultivation to the extent that you've gone through spending time, money to draft an ordinance and to work on it to this extent. You may want to think about maximizing the opportunity that you have here in the form of tax revenue. The larger these cannabis grows are and the more efficiently you use these parcels will lead you to that effect. Last thing I want to hit on is the taxes, though it is not the subject matter of the current draft. It's been brought up more than once tonight. Again, as it's been spoken to, Monterey County enacted a $15 a square foot tax that actually hikes up after that. I would suggest a more neutered approach on that. These are new businesses or new operations. There have been significant capital expenditures made, and I think it would be much more efficient to allow them the chance to recoup this first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean Cali-Ray.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I want to thank the ad hoc committee. They did a fantastic job. The county counsel's office, Pinnacle Strategies, and staff. This is one of the fastest ordinances that I've seen, but one of the most complete. I think waiting on the county's part was probably a smart idea, so you can pull from other jurisdictions and look at what mistakes they've made and not make those same mistakes in drafting an ordinance. To Peter's points, premises really do need to have multiple licenses. I mean, I don't think you want lots of small cultivators all over the county. And I don't think that you want marijuana cultivation taking over agricultural production. So if you only allow one per parcel, there's going to be more parcels grabbed for marijuana cultivation, therefore taking it away from other agriculture. I don't think that you want really to see one industry cannibalize another. So it may make a lot of sense. I have some clients that are looking at 100-acre parcels, either to be able to subdivide those into smaller lots. If that's not possible, which you may not want to subdivide larger lots, to at least allow multiple licenses on those lots, because it just makes more sense from an enforcement perspective. If you're going to have the sheriff go out and patrol, you want them to be able to go to perhaps one 100-acre, 200-acre, 300-acre site and look at multiple licenses in one area and not have it be around schools. Your incidence or your closeness or proximity to these sensitive receptors is going to be less if they're all sort of congregated in smaller areas. San Jose did this with dispensaries, and it worked out pretty well. It made them, and actually it's a critical mass that actually works well for the industry too, because power and water can all be in the same place. Setbacks is an issue. Unless you have a large parcel, the 400 feet just doesn't work. So you're really going to be inadvertently punishing small property owners in the process. If somebody has a 5-acre parcel or a 10-acre parcel and they have to do a 400-foot setback from the parcel line, those parcels may not work, or an irregular shaped parcel may not work. I think that the 1,000-foot setbacks from sensitive receptors make a ton of sense. That just makes so much sense, and it is good for the community to have 1,000 foot. But it should be building to building as opposed to parcel to parcel. Some of these parcels are so large that from one parcel to another, you're just not going to get there. And then the final point is really having a 4-acre parcel under a 10A. We talked about that. Some of my clients are vertically integrated, are going to be having a 4-acre parcel under the state law, and would like to do that on a parcel here. That's 160,000 square foot of greenhouse. They're not talking about outdoor grow. So thank you for your time.
Tim McCord.
Tim McCord. I'm out in the North County, San Benito County. The main concerns I have is our water issues. We have to deal with our aquifers that we have underneath. We're now faced as ranchers out in our area that we have to deal with the NOI, that we have to file a notice of intent to farm with the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. We also then are required to belong to the Central Coast Groundwater Coalition, and we have to pay a fee for this. We have to personally, now they just put in that we have to personally monitor our own wells for nitrates, which we have a cost in that fact, and that we also have to be required to belong to the Central Coast Water Quality Preservation, which is our groundwater runoff, and we pay a fee for that right now. Now, not all farmers are doing this, but you have to take a hard look if you're going to have any marijuana cultivation of marijuana, they're considered to be farmers. So the county is going to have to take a look, what are the requirements going to be? Are they going to be required to file these things? It's a hit and miss situation right now, and it's getting pretty serious. I'm paying fees into all these things, and then I have neighbors that don't have to pay the fees, and they get to farm. But if you're producing any kind of an agricultural product that's for sale, it's supposed to be monitored. So this is one thing I think you need to take a hard look at, and how it's going to be regulated and who's going to oversee all these things in our county. I mean, we have trouble right now just trying to get our regular county to come in and to monitor buildings and everything else. So it's all part of it. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judy McCord.
I have two concerns. One is the smell. In the summertime, you can't even open the windows, and we do not have air conditioning. It is so bad. The skunk smell is just horrific. The other thing is, in the last couple of years, you're working in your garden, you hear these strange men walking through. You can walk from Highway 156 clear to Spring Grove School, and no fences in between. And they just show up, and they're following the scent, too.
Madam,
so you know where they're headed.
Madam, can you address to the board, please?
So it's the people and the traffic the last year coming out that way was just horrific, especially at night, coming on the road, turning around and going out. But the people, men walking, I haven't seen any women, but you're working in the orchard, pruning up the trees, and here these men are walking through. And it just is very, very scary. But the smell, if they have these things, they got to be contained so they're not, putting out this smell for everybody else to have to contend with. It's just not right. You move to the country, you have animals and everything else, and you got this horrific skunk smell that is just horrible, just horrible.
Thank you.
Clint Bishop.
Hello, thanks for listening to me. I'll speak to you as a former marijuana user and as a person who's been in production of nursery stock or sales and marketing of nursery stock in the business for 28 years. And I can tell you that I used to be the director of sales and marketing for a farm that was bought out by Harborside or by a large cannabis grower. That 40-year legacy business is now gone. Used to grow ornamental plants. The problem that we have is that, according to the New York Times last week, California produces 3 times as much marijuana as it consumes. Also, I wonder if this is all for medicine. Right now, if somebody was distributing, manufacturing prescription drugs in the kind of scale that they are in the county, they'd be hauled off and put in a penitentiary. I don't see any enforcement. There's a smell all the time around my house down in Fairview and Fallon in your district, Mr. Medina. We'll be watching very closely how you're going to vote on this stuff. These people are illegal. These people are dealing drugs. And there is absolutely no enforcement. So I have to ask the council, I have to ask the Board of Supervisors and you, sir, how are you going to guarantee us that you're going to enforce anything? You're not enforcing anything right now. How are you going to guarantee they're not going to transport this stuff around? I see they can't transport it. Is it going to be vaporized and moved somewhere else, or is it going to go by truck somehow? With the kind of competition that you have right now, you have 73 permits in Monterey County. If you're saying this is all going to be for medical and you're only going to allow medical, you are going to be destroyed by the competition, because I guarantee you Harborside and everybody else is growing it for recreation. I just got back from a trip to Denver. I happened to be there, unfortunately, on 420 for some business. But I saw thousands of patients there, and I would say most of those patients were unemployable. There was a law that they weren't supposed to smoke it in the park. The park was full of smoke. You couldn't even walk through the park. There was a dispensary on every corner with nice bright green balloons for the kids to see. That was for all the patients too, I guess. Also, that trip, I can just tell you, right in the Target shopping center, there's a dispensary. There's people carrying their bags of edibles and selling them to each other in the parking lot. So I just wonder about the credibility. There's no enforcement now. You're kidding yourself if you say it's for medical use. And I think it's a gold rush. It's all going to be over in a few years, and there will be, like with any other gold rush, a trail of devastation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Anne-Marie Faria.
I'm going to pass this time.
We'll put it to the end.
Tim Foley.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm a resident around the Fallon, Fairview area. I do get concerned when people have moved to the country and they don't want the smells or activities that go on. We are an agricultural community. It is our heritage. We have people out there that have had farms for a century, 3 generations of a family that are interested in pursuing this in a responsible, legal manner. So I would request that we pursue this in this very methodical approach. So I hope that we will be able to pursue the cultivation in this responsible way. I support it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean Donahoe. And this Snowdy. Jack Kirk.
Supervisor De La Cruz, I just want to point out I was not trying to be disrespectful. I just couldn't hear you. Maybe it's my old ears, but
Actually, I got O ears too. We're on the same.
Okay. Well, we weren't communicating there, so I was not being disrespectful. I appreciate the opportunity, and I see the work that you've done here. There's a couple items we also went through. I mean, we spent time trying to consider this ordinance, and overall, I think it's a great ordinance. I point out a couple things. One is, Sean from San Jose. Sean from San Jose doesn't understand 5 acres is our homes. That's a home lot that's designated North County. So when you put a marijuana concern next to a 5-acre home, it's hard not to smell that. we smell horses. Appreciate appreciate the comments about we live in a farm community. We smell horses, we smell cattle, we smell all that kind of stuff. That's all normal. But we add marijuana smell, and we live 5 acres. I don't know that 400 feet is a hardship. Maybe 5 acres are not the place where you grow in a rural residential area where you grow marijuana, and maybe we need to push it off the larger. I like the earlier comment from Sean about maybe perhaps working to multiple licenses at larger sites where you can control it. I think there's some logic to that, and I appreciate that where he made that consideration, because right now you're 1 permit per site, and that but we went through and. There was also, I want to support that we've talked to Mr. Medina often about having hard-sided, sites, and we'd really encourage you to do that. I think that would go a long ways, as we did when we worked on the city ordinance of controlling smell and other pollutants and security, and that's on page 5, Mr. De La Cruz. And, so when you define the greenhouses, we'd really encourage you to work with a hard-sided and then in item R, maybe strike or similar structure when you have greenhouses. So we're all surrounded by the hoop buildings right now, We wondered why in the exclusions of elementary schools and things affect children, why daycare centers and preschools were purposely excluded. I know the county has a daycare center out there, self-help center, and then they got the Gavilan welding building turning into marijuana next door. Perhaps that was a little give there to not keep those kind of buildings, Gavilan welding, which is where the city kind of wanted the marijuana to go in those areas. But that's turning into a marijuana grow and cultivation site and dispensing. We would. If I could just ask one other thing, just specialty indoor cottage mix, we did not understand. We didn't see that zoning, so we were trying to understand what that was. If maybe that could be clarified. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Page?
Did you have another? Okay.
The specialty?
Oh, the page for was page 9 for the zoning categories. We see that especially indoor, especially mixed light, especially cottage, and I didn't see in the zoning laws where that was clarified, so we were just trying to understand what that meant.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much.
Any other speakers?
The only speaker cards left is pass. I stepped out. I didn't pass. My name is Sean Donahoe. Sorry. Sweet. Thank you. Hi, it's good to see members of the board again. Thank you, county staff. Thanks, Victor, for all your hard work. I agree with Sean, this is a fantastically rapid turnaround on everything. And of course, everything that's going on at the state level is very exciting, with both the draft medical regulations, the pending adult use regulations, the governor's trailer bill language, and the 40-plus bills that are still actively creating a moving target. I would say that this is a great ordinance, but Prop 64 did pass. So it is worth considering whether there's elements of Prop 64 that might be interesting to apply in this case. I would point to the requirement to have authorization of local authorization of recreational or non-medical license types in order to apply for some of the grants that are available to law enforcement to crack down on enforcement of illegal grows. One of the things that was put in place at the request of local governments in Prop 64 was a very robust grant program that is only available to jurisdictions that allow for some sort of adult use, some sort of non-medical cultivation or other license type to be available. I would suggest that the micro-business license type, which is very limited in scale, which is very limited in impact upon neighbors, that has no more than, I believe, 25 plants available as an example of the first license type, and perhaps the first and only license type of a non-medical sort that the county might be interested in engaging in. I would also point out that there is no discussion here of industrial hemp. I know that a couple of the supervisors discussed that, and industrial hemp is available in a draft ordinance that the county of San Luis Obispo released last week, and I would highly encourage looking particularly in some of the more security problematic areas of the Southeast County, that those would be available for non-controversial agricultural crop production of industrial hemp that will be available, licenses that will be available by the California Department of Food and Ag as soon as they set up their registry program that's envisioned as a result of Prop 64. So I'm excited about the progress that I see. I would suggest a couple of tweaks. Obviously, I concur with some of the setbacks comments, but I suggest that you also consider the microbusiness non-medical license as well as the industrial hemp zoning and other sort of land use anticipation that might be appropriate to properly separate the two crop types. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
Steve Becerra.
So I'd like to thank you for Steve Becerra, the resident of San Benito County. Can I direct your attention to page 19? And once you get to page 19, I'd like you to take a look at what I brought on the table there. And I want you to envision that to be under 1 kilogram, let's say 2 pounds of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, crack cocaine, or maybe even 3 gallons of liquid PCP. So in your ordinance as it stands on page 19, you talk about and I'll read it for you, the reasons that people have been convicted of felony crimes can be denied. You talk about violent felonies and serious felonies. Perfect. You talk about someone who's been convicted as felony of fraud, deceit, or embezzlement. So someone has to embezzle $2,500 or more for their employer before they were not allowed to have a permit. You also talk about a felony conviction for drug trafficking with enhancements pursuant to California Health and Safety Code 11370.4 and 11379.8. And then you go on to state, and a prior conviction for the possession for sale, manufacture, transportation, or cultivation of a controlled substance where the sentence is completed for shall not be the sole ground for denial of license. 11370.4 and 11370.9 apply to only people that have been convicted of selling cocaine, heroin, or methamphetamine in excess of 1 kilogram or more. So what you're saying is, if 3 years ago I sold 2 pounds of heroin, went to prison, got out of prison, got off parole, you're going to give me a permit to sell medical marijuana. So I would think that you would consider any felony conviction for controlled substances would be a reason to deny someone to have a permit to grow medical marijuana in our county. And I'll touch quickly on if you're going to not allow any areas in south of Bellotto Park and all that rangeland. There's a lot of people that live in agri-productive areas north of Bellotto Park. And I guess how is somebody going to grow marijuana in south of Bellotto Park and rangeland? They're going to get water just like everybody who lives down there does. So you're cutting out a lot of potential areas where people can grow marijuana. And I love Sean's idea. Cluster these things. It's a great idea. If you do allow cultivation in areas in ag productive in 5, 10, 20 acre parcels, then you better make it only indoors, in buildings. Forget about the greenhouses, forget about the hoop houses, put it indoors, have a really strong odor management policy, air scrubbing, make sure that no smell comes outside of that building. If you're going to do that, it should be hard-sided buildings only. No greenhouses, no hoop houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Hi, good evening to the board. My name is Mandisa, and I'm a county resident, and I'm really concerned about the discouragement that this ordinance presents from organic farming practices. Plants thrive from seed in the ground with water and sunlight, and putting them in enclosed building. You're saying you want medicinal cannabis only to be grown in this county. And then you're simultaneously saying that you only want this medicinal cannabis to be grown indoors. And as a patient advocate, like, I'm a strong proponent of sustainable farming practices, permaculture techniques even, to be able to protect the actual medicinal quality of the plant. So, indoor cultivation stemmed from a non-regulated market. People trying to hide their grows is the reason why there's even they're utilizing full spectrum lighting techniques to mimic the sun, because plants thrive with sunlight. So I'm a little disappointed that there's not even maybe a provision for a hoop house or for mixed covering during cultivation practices. They're also preventing small-scale horticultural therapy, which is another huge benefit of medicinal cannabis and medicinal plants, is giving patients in this county safe access to be able to build that patient-to-plant relationship. When these cultivation areas are only in warehouses inside, liken that to patients. Like, how well do people thrive locked up in a room under artificial light all day? They don't, right? They value natural environment. And as someone interested in starting a business, I'm a graduate of San Benito High School. I grew up in San Juan Bautista. This is my home. I don't want to go and move somewhere else to be able to pursue, my dreams. I want to be able to do that here at home where I raise my kids in an ethical, sustainable manner. We're farmers historically. That's part of all, I like, the comment that is our culture. I think it's important that we already, we don't have to recreate the wheel, really, because we already know how to farm. This is, it's a crop that grows from a seed. It's a plant. And I think that carrying on practices for regulated business that came out of an unregulated industry would just be a mistake at this point, because what you're doing is you're promoting hiding and the stigma that this is drug culture. At the same breath, you're saying we want medicinal only. So I'm just kind of pointing out that difference that I noted, and would be very interested in meeting with any of the board members to discuss it further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dan Hudson. I live in Aromas in San Benito County. I first of all wanted to say what the young lady just spoke of before I thought was very important. It is a crop that comes from seed, and it's not a demonized crop. We're not protecting people from drugs. I also want to say that the smell that people are complaining about, that's their opinion, and everybody's to their own opinion. But I feel that it's really not that offensive. I've been one of the cultivators in the county for the last couple of years. I am a collective. I am legal, recognized in the state. None of my neighbors, I live on 17 acres, none of my neighbors have ever complained about a smell. I really don't get it. But there are charcoal filters for greenhouses that can prevent the smell, and that's not that expensive, so that's really not going to be a problem. But the other thing I want to talk about is the gentleman that was here talking about, or the last couple gentlemen talking about giving multiple permits. Now, that would make your job very easy. You could have Harborside come in and do 160,000 acres. You could have RG Reynolds come in and do 250 acres, and you could have Monsanto come in and do 5,000 acres, and you would only have 3 clients. But we're going to be competing, us small boutique people that want to work with organic, we're going to be competing against these people. If you want to be like Monterey and have greenhouses for miles and miles, then give multiple permits per site, because those multiple permits are going to be one owner. There's going to be one owner owning all those places. It's not going to be a bunch of different people owning that. So I really like the idea of one permit per property. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Board. My name is Elia Salinas, and I'm a county resident of San Benito. I've got a couple of points that I'd like to make, including the exclusion of South County. I don't understand why San Benito, north of Bellado Park, I think there are already growers in the South County, so I don't think there's a water issue, if that's what you're trying to say. I can understand the Sheriff Department saying about law enforcement and having and so forth, but I think that that it's going to be taken into consideration with the fees that are going to be requested with the application. So I think that there's going to be plenty of money that's going to be able to help the Sheriff's Department with enforcement down there. If you were to exclude South County, as Sean Donahoe was saying earlier, I think you haven't mentioned hemp, and I think that hemp could be a really big industry that doesn't need the requirements that medical and recreational adult use is going to use. So I think you should reconsider using South County. I don't believe there's a water issue, especially because I think you could use hemp, and there are a lot of medical growers out there right now, and this would really hinder their livelihood because you would be closing them out. Greenhouses can be filtered with carbon filters, as somebody else mentioned. So I don't think there's an issue with regards to odor. I have a problem with large sites. There are a lot of people here who want to get into the industry, and if you're saying that somebody's going to come in and they're going to build a 100-acre site, and this is a place to be because it's going to be all confounded in one area, then that's going to exclude a lot of people out there that want to get into it. They don't have the big money that this big out-of-towners are coming in with all this money. So why exclude local people that want to be able to do, whether it's micro or cottage or just a small type of grow? They want to be in this industry. I don't think you should exclude them. Also, I think you should reconsider in doing outdoor. There are plenty of places in the county where outdoor can be used without any of the nuisance to the neighbors. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll close it. Okay. All right. So we heard comments from the public. Do any of the fellow supervisors wish to address any of the items that were discussed out in the public?
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I just want to thank all of those who provided comments. Certainly I was taking notes, and I think the one that struck me the most was the issues surrounding water compliance. I think that's a discussion that we really haven't had at the ad hoc level that I think we need to. We do. I think the comments were related to agricultural or the agriculture, the production, and the monitoring. And so that's something, that's certainly an issue that is important, as far as, we're just coming off of this. We still have a drought, even though we had, I think it was the wettest year on record here in California. But certainly the drought and certainly our groundwater, our supplies, is a concern. And so moving forward, I think at the ad hoc level, we need to have that discussion of what's the impact to our water supply and what can we expect. And I'm not sure if we have to talk to the water district or some water experts, but certainly I think that needs to happen. But other than that, I really appreciate all of the comments, and we'll go back and we'll certainly make the changes that we need to make. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
So first of all, I want to thank the public too for being here. We do appreciate your comments, and hopefully the committee will take your comments and questions and concerns into consideration. Question to the committee: this draft is the template that most likely we'll see with some modifications. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's expected. Yeah,
that's expected. And I asked this before. So, question to the committee: is hemp out of the question then?
No, that question was brought to me, and why hemp wasn't clear. I don't tell you why. And this thing is 20-something pages. I really appreciate staff. Sometimes we're sitting in these meetings and they'll just, I'm not, I'll be zoning out because it's a long time, and staff will say, "Is this okay with you guys?" Yeah, we're gonna have this public vetting process, and this is why we're doing this. And so certainly I appreciate the comments about hemp, and that's something else that we've got to discuss because it's nowhere in the ordinance.
Okay,
and so that's something that we can review.
Perfect. And then my next question is, and I guess this is more a question for Supervisor Patello and Munzer. are you guys acceptable with the 1 through 3 type of permits that we're going to issue, up to 22,000 square feet? Is that something that we're going to allow the committee to move forward on?
I'm fine with that, and one of the things that kind of strike me is something that we have to be real careful about going forward as a county. One of the things we do have a tough time with code enforcement, and this will be no different. And if we have as many operators, say there's 30 that did apply for the amortization exemption or whatever we did, and then there's a vast multitude of people that are interested in getting into this type of business, all of a sudden we have 100 of them. How is this small county with the staffing that we have, I don't care what kind of revenue we are able to bring in, able to kind of keep a handle on this? So that's something that the committee is to have to kind of weigh, and the staff needs to weigh as far as the balance, at least on the initial start of this ordinance. But the numbers and the tiers that you have for 2-A on page 9, I'm fine with. I think there's protections for zoning already that have been that some folks are, stated that they have a nuisance next door. I think there's some protections there are already in the ordinance. So, and should be encouraging. So if that answers your question,
Well,
Mr. Chairman.
I guess my question is directly yes or no question. Do you accept the matrix that the subcommittee had come up with on the permit types?
For the time being.
For the time being,
there's a lot more public comment that needs to happen and planning commission input, but
because from past experience, what is a draft most likely will become the original ordinance with some minor tweaks. And so my question to the board is: this is a major changer. This one item number 2 on page 9. So you're willing to accept other types of permit structures? Is that correct?
As a draft.
As a draft? Okay. I understand what you're saying. At least it's brought up and we can discuss it further.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Supervisor Munzer?
I'm good with it also.
You're good? Okay. Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I did want to mention, and Mark, feel free to jump in when you want, about the enforcement issue. And so you bring up a very good point, Supervisor. And so we're very concerned about enforcement. I mean, I know that there were some comments about lack of enforcement. We all agree there was a lack of enforcement. I mean, we had implemented and adopted this temporary ordinance, and it was botched. It didn't work. There was a lot of confusion surrounding that ordinance. In fact, it was our first ad hoc meeting. I walked into the room, and I said, "Hey, Sheriff, how come we're not enforcing?" And the sheriff looked at me and said, "Because you guys don't let us." I wish he would have approached me and told me why, and I learned why. And so then we brought it back to the board about, the amortization process and having these hearings on those filed applicants. And so certainly there was a lot of confusion and some discrepancy between our board and staff and the public. And we've had those discussions, and that's why I think you see things like a cannabis coordinator, and the sheriff has actively participated in this whole process because we know that we can't afford to botch this again. We know that moving forward, enforcement is going to be a key component of this ordinance. And so these are issues that we've talked about several times, and this is what we're going to, we'll continue to work. It's never going to be perfect, but it certainly will be a lot better than what it's been. So,
thank you. I got a question for our staff. Anyone who's willing to volunteer with that information, of the permits that were submitted on the urgency ordinance, do any of those meet any of these first 3 rough draft? Victor, anyone has that information?
Mr. Chair, out of the applicants, the initial applicants, I didn't review those, so I'm not sure if we have that information.
Okay.
Apologies, but could you please repeat your question so that I can try to accurately
Sure.
answer
Of the, 26 applications that we have, of the 26 or 23, I don't know, of those applications, any of these, all those applications, were they qualified under the type A, 1 through 3?
In terms of, we're talking about size and all the other requirements.
If we were to prove this today, were they qualified?
I don't have the size of those actual cultivation sites, so that's one of the issues that I couldn't even address to you. The applications are still, of course, being looked at because they did have another request go out for additional information, and the board certainly will be hearing evidence with regard to those applications from both sides in a few weeks here. So without making a determination and telling you what's in those applications and the county's position on them, I will say that I certainly don't have any size in terms of what the grow site looks like. No applications included the size.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. Supervisor Medina?
Well, I can say out of all the applicants that I've seen, there are some that definitely fit within this
Thank you.
number.
Thank you for that information. Okay. Does the committee wish to discuss the number of permits, or that's something that you guys will come up down the road?
I think it's something we'll come up with down the road.
Okay, perfect. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to address the water issues, as Mr. McCord brought up. I believe it was Mr. McCord brought up. I don't know if that is something that we can incorporate into the ordinance. I know Supervisor Rivas said he would look into it, but the requirement of any applicant, any grower, become part of these associations, for lack of a better word, that are required for using water for ag. Also, as far as growing below or south of Bellotto Park, I'm not tied in or with Bellotto Park as being the line of demarcation, but we received a report this afternoon from Jeff Cantano, the general manager of the San Benito County Water District, and the legal agricultural operations going on south of Tres Pinos, south of Paisanas, is taxing the water levels down there. And this is after a very wet year. They're already being taxed. So I think we need to look at that very closely to see if there is enough water to sustain this kind of growth or additional growth in the South County. And we all know we have a lot of illegal grow down there. I think if we just turn the whole county loose and people can grow legally everywhere, we're going to tie the hands of our law enforcement to be able to enforce anything down there on these illegal grows. So, not saying that the line's going to be drawn at Bellotto Park, but I do think there needs to be a line drawn somewhere that would exclude the southern portion of our county. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Munzer. Okay. Does the committee have enough information to move forward?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does staff wish to provide final thoughts? None? Victor, do you want to provide final thoughts?
Yeah, so a couple of things, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that, and we appreciate the feedback, and we certainly taken notes, and we'll take this back and sit down with Sarah and go over collectively your thoughts this afternoon. So, actually, before I get into this, I'm going to allow Sarah to chime in on a couple of issues that were brought up, and so do I. I want to address some of the issues that were brought up by public speakers.
Thank you, supervisors. So some of the questions that had come up a lot were the waiver provisions with regard to the setbacks. And so what I wanted to at least address was that the way the ordinance is currently written, and certainly if the board would like to go a different direction, we can amend it. But the way the waiver is currently written is only in regard to waiving the setback requirements of 1,000 feet for sensitive receptors or the 400 feet for the premises boundary lines from the facility. With a note that the
minimum required by the state for sensitive receptors is 600 feet. So the 1,000 feet is just simply a more a longer distance from those sensitive receptors. That is very common from other jurisdictions as well. With regard to the specialty cottage permit, that comes directly out of Business and Professions Code section 19332 sub G4. It does have different square footage requirements if it's going to be mixed light, outdoor, or completely indoor. So that's something that certainly would need to be discussed by the ad hoc if the board is interested in that specialty cottage permit. With regard to the criminal conviction.
Hold on.
You said the word outdoor?
I did say the word outdoor. I know that
I want to make sure. I want to be clear.
Outdoor.
I want to just be clear. This is nothing to do with outdoor. It's all indoor. And nothing.
That's the way that the board has wanted to go, but I'm just letting you know that the way that the state sets up the specialty cottage is to allow for a different type, and certainly the board can limit what type of specialty cottage permit they want to be able to issue.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And then finally, before I get onto one of the main things I wanted to tell you guys about, with regard to criminal conviction information, what we currently have in the ordinance does come directly out of Business and Professions Code section 19323 subdivision B4. I did want you to be aware of that because that is one of the requirements from the state for the state license. And then finally, I just wanted to let you guys know that currently there is a trailer bill that is out there which is recommending the consolidation of the MCRSA and AMA. Certainly if a passage of a trailer bill comes our way, even if we are to pass an ordinance, there may be a need to revise that ordinance due to update in the codes because potentially the MCRSA will be revoked and everything potentially will go under the bones of the AMA, but it will incorporate potentially the MCRSA provision. So I just wanted to let the board and the public know about that since this is something that's still up in the air. It's causing some confusion for other jurisdictions, but we're all on top of it and just wanted to let you guys know. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good job.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of things that were brought up by the public. I just want to make sure that we at least answer those questions really briefly. So as I mentioned before, we'll collect all this information. We'll take it back, sit down with the ad hoc committee. I think County Council and I could probably sit down and make sure that we're collected the information correctly, put together a draft, redraft, or update it, and then again sit down with the ad hoc committee members and stakeholders to do another review before coming back in June. But with that said, once that is completed, then we'll come back with the rules, regs, operating procedures. That's when we'll get into a lot of the issues that you're not hearing about today. Again, that's the enforcement component of it, and what's been brought up a couple of times here, and that's odor. Right, that is a concern. It's been brought up by both ad hoc committee members. I'm sure it's a concern of yours as well. So with both fully enclosed and greenhouse, there will be odor mitigation requirements through the operating through the rules and regulations for operators. So you will have that included as part of requirement for operation. And then the question on really how to enforce. And I know Supervisor Rivas brought that up as well, and it certainly was a concern to both of the supervisors during the meetings. And really, that's why we're making sure that we do have that cost recovery in there, right? We do want to make sure, as Supervisor Botello mentioned as well, is as indicated, maybe the enforcement hasn't been there as you'd like to see. Well, this will allow you to capture the necessary revenue to make sure that you're following through with enforcement of this new policy, right? So it will be there. And regarding the line, this line that we're talking about, South County, we'll call it the South County line. I'll certainly sit down with you, Supervisor Munzer, and discuss it a little bit more. I am meeting with our planning staff, with James on Thursday. You're more than welcome to participate in that meeting as well. We'd love your guidance and your thoughts around where we could probably draw that line up. So again, I just wanted to touch on those issues that were brought up by by the public. And then one last thing, and I certainly want to thank Louis and staff on this, and we wanted to make sure we had a landing page for folks. There's going to be a lot of questions out there. You've received a lot of calls and emails. I've received a lot of calls and emails as well. We want to have really a central location to provide information for the public, industry members, anybody that really wants to see where we're at with the process. So staff did develop a new website, sbc-mcr-program.com. Again, that's sbc-mcr-program.com. That currently has the draft ordinance set up, and we'll make sure that we continually, it's as Louis will want me to mention, it's in progress of being built, right? So it is happening currently. So thank you, Louis and IT staff for getting that done. It does have the ordinance, draft ordinance, and it'll continually be updated with information for the public as well. So I believe that is all I have, unless you have any other questions, Mr. Chair.
Victor, when is the next board meeting?
Your board meeting is the 23rd.
No, but I mean in reference to medical marijuana.
Ad hoc? We don't have one set yet, so I could send you a reminder for all your board meetings if you'd like.
We'll make sure you're
It's been
there.
a long day.
Wow.
When I think board meeting, I think your board meeting. Sorry.
No.
We don't have one set yet. Really, we wanted to get direction from you folks. We wanted to see how much work you were going to give us and have ample time to connect with staffs. So.
Can't hear you.
For the amortization request, right, they're scheduled for May 23rd. And then as far as future meetings on the ordinance, I'd like to see it come back on, I believe, June 13th is the first meeting in June for the Board of Supervisors. And then have it scheduled for the Planning Commission second look at, we're trying to get the first look for the May Planning Commission meeting, and then the second look at it, if everything goes okay, for a recommendation to the board at the June 21st Planning Commission meeting. And then it could come back to the board in July 18th for potential adoption.
The July 18th might be a tough one, so you might want to have a first meeting in August.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
Been a long day. Okay. Any other information? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion 5-0. Thank you.